Hey everybody, welcome back to another 10-minute Marvel video. We're doing a reaction, first impressions of episode 3 of Daredevil Born Again. I'm going to dive into spoilers, but I want to talk about this in try and keep it more in general terms here to start, and just kind of give those impressions in case you haven't watched it yet, in case you're like, I want a little more of that show to come out before I decide if I want to dive into it or not. Through 3 episodes, I've been very impressed by this show. I think, honestly, this latest episode might be the best one for me personally. And I think there will be some people who have complaints about it with certain elements for it that I'll talk about in spoilers. But to me, this really feels like such a well put together show. That kind of sounds weird to say, but what I mean by that is Marvel's hit or miss when it comes to their television shows feeling like television shows. Sometimes, take Falcon and the Winter Soldier, even Secret Invasion. You could argue, I could even argue Miss Marvel to some extent, though the character work in that is just so good that I give it kind of a pass, but it doesn't feel like a traditional TV show. Now, feeling like a traditional TV show is not kind of the end-all be-all, but it means that you have to try and hit certain story beats within the time frame that you have. We generally saw that in WandaVision. We generally saw that in Agatha Long. We've generally seen that in Loki. I think we generally saw that in Moon Knight, though Moon Knight kind of fumbled the end of it with that big, and same for Miss Marvel actually. Those two examples are generally two that show up well as TV shows, but then kind of try and do the big movie ending. Even WandaVision has that element to it, though it makes more sense because that one at least wasn't necessarily ever going to set up another series. But anyways, I'm getting kind of off track. Daredevil Born Again, every episode thus far feels like a full, complete episode. It may set up some things for the future, but it's like television in that you sit down and you get a story, and then you're left wanting more to see the whole picture. Maybe a better way to describe it is kind of like you're reading a series of books. You finish the first book, which in this case might be the first 2 episodes, and you're left wanting to see what happens next in that story. Then you get that again in this episode 3. It's its own book. It's its own story. It tells this contained, specific story, but then leaves you wanting more. And to me, that's, whether it follows like 100% traditional TV kind of methodology, it doesn't need to do that. In fact, it should subvert that at some points in time. And I think this show has kind of subverted some expectations already. But with that, it still needs to provide that great story, that great character development that really you see in the best Marvel shows. And Daredevil Born Again, I think, has given you the character development, not necessarily from the character you'd expect, and that phenomenal story. And there's so much, like, the story is exploding open right now, and I love that for this, because in some ways the character development for the expected character, Daredevil, is going to happen because the story has exploded open. So if you've been hesitant to watch the series, worried that maybe it won't live up to your expectations of the Daredevil season 4, basically, because you love the Netflix series so much, or maybe you thought there were elements of the Netflix series that maybe the pacing wasn't the best. That's kind of my issue, why I haven't been able to like push past that first hump yet of the Netflix series, is that the starting pacing is just clutchy for me. But this one has that smooth, really well developed pacing that you expect and want from a show. And yeah, I've been so impressed by this show thus far. But let's move into spoilers. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. You have been warned. Spoilers. Now, I suspect that a lot of what we see in this episode was actually shot kind of prior to some of the creative changes. This is the courtroom stuff that was happening that, honestly, it tells a phenomenal story. This is the courtroom. Basically, the whole episode is just courtroom drama of trying to get Hector Ayala acquitted of the murder charges, or found not guilty of the murder charges, and the twists along the way, the reveal of the White Tiger to the public is just really well done. And you don't have Matt playing around as Daredevil in this episode, and it doesn't make sense story-wise for him to play around as Daredevil. I think probably the reason why it had to be reworked is they didn't have the whole Foggy dying element in the first episode. They didn't have him in his suit, and then Foggy's death really giving him that reason why he no longer is Daredevil. And now the White Tiger has given him a reason to be Daredevil again, and it's just so extremely well done in the story and the crafting and the pacing. I love the witness who turns, who lies under oath about not knowing the cops, not being there. And that is just it was a great element to this that forced Matt Murdock to do the White Tiger reveal. And like I said, I think this is kind of the point where Matt is going to start to have his character growth. And he's going to have his character growth for a couple different reasons. First, the White Tiger kind of challenges him. Hector Ayala challenges him or his notions without knowing that Matt is Daredevil. It doesn't really matter. You have to do the right thing. And part of Matt's struggle right now is Foggy was killed in kind of the line of doing the right thing by Bullseye, and Matt is struggling with that still. We get that scene with Heather Glenn at the end of this episode where he talks about how he and Foggy would celebrate their wins. And you really get this idea of Foggy is, or was, I should say, kind of that conscience on the shoulder, that person who, but not just that, that person who kept Matt from spiraling down, if that makes sense. Because Foggy could always try and lift him up and see the good in life and good in the world and in people, and appreciate and celebrate those little wins. And Matt struggles with that because, yes, he is a lawyer who wants to do the right things, take on the tough cases for the right reasons. But also, as Daredevil, he sees the darkness, the seediness of the city. And that is just really well done. But then the element that I love that was intertwined with this, which is really kicking off the other part of the story, the other challenge that's going to come for Matt Murdock is, well, for Daredevil really more so, is a vigilante was just allowed to walk free, and Fisk is pissed. Fisk is not pleased with that idea that vigilantes can run the town. In fact, he's not pleased with a lot this episode. I like the kind of struggle and conversation that he and Vanessa have as they're going into the second round of therapy. I love the shot that is very Citizen Kane of them eating breakfast or lunch. I forget which meal it is. Whatever meal it is, but they're at opposite ends of this large table. That was something that was done in Citizen Kane, where they started out close together and they moved progressively further apart down the table to really show that separation between those people. And we get that sort of shot without the setup, but because it's now kind of a touchstone, it's something that people recognize as that separate, to stand for these people are separated. There's this gap, physical gap between the people, and we know what it means from its use in media today. So I like that element to it. But then I also like Fisk kind of going on the attack. This idea, he goes on the attack once Hector Ayala has been found not guilty. And he doesn't go through normal routes. He brings back in BB Urich. And that is, I think, one of the elements that I've enjoyed so much about the show is the BB Urich character and how she is kind of the voice on the streets. But I also like how it shows that Kingpin is really savvy. Fisk is really savvy. He knows that printing something in a newspaper about and doing an interview there about how vigilantes are bad isn't going to get its eyes, like the eyes of the right people on it. He needs kind of that underground movement, that swell of people who are apt to get passionate about it because they see their news source as being unique and special and getting to them in a way that they know how to consume it and understand it. And him working the system and reaching out to BB Urich to do that, or having his aide reach out to BB Urich to do that, I think is just so well done. And now that he's starting the war on vigilantes, that's going to cause additional issues and questions for a Daredevil. Because now that the war is actively taking place, or will be coming up here, with a new rule, a new law, a new decree, whatever you want to call it, a new act for the city of New York that I suspect is going to outlaw vigilantism. And there's going to be probably people on both sides of that. And I like kind of that struggle, but also I like how Fisk is now doubling down on his promise that he made as mayor that he was going to be tough on vigilantes. And the conversation that he had with Matt about how as long as Matt keeps the Daredevil costume off, that they don't have an issue. But the second that comes back on, they're going to have an issue. And then I do want to talk a little bit more about Fisk and Vanessa. I already talked about kind of that gap and everything there, but I like the conversation and kind of how Vanessa is still trying to show strength and show that they're running the crime world, but Wilson Fisk is against that. When she makes the one side give restitution to the other, then like Fisk is basically like, no, we need that war to happen. And I think he has plans for this. I think it's part of his calculated plan as mayor to have this gang war kick off. This now headless monster, because he's and Vanessa aren't controlling it, kick off into this battle that will happen, that is going to spill over into normal people's lives and is going to tempt, he's hoping, Matt Murdock and other heroes out of the woodwork and into this battle so that he can proclaim again that vigilantes are causing the problem. Like, they can't stop this. He is going to step in with the long arm of the law, and that is going to take care of this problem. But vigilantes just exacerbate. They are not true law. And then, final thing I want to talk about is this very end. And honestly, it's worth sitting through the credits. Not because there's anything in the credits. There's no post-credit scene or anything like that. But when Hector Ayala puts back on the White Tiger suit and then gets shot by the Punisher or somebody wearing Punisher-branded stuff, I suspect it's going to be, well, who knows. The Punisher may have his own reasons for this, because as much as we like to think of the Punisher as kind of this hero character, the Punisher is not a hero. The Punisher is, at best, a true, like a lawful neutral, not even lawful neutral, like a true neutral character bordering on lawful evil. And just what I mean by that, I'm talking in like RPG Dungeons and Dragons parlance here. He is going to go after those people he considers in the wrong with extreme prejudice. He will kill people. And that's hard to see why he would look at Hector Ayala's White Tiger as a threat. Obviously, the police have much more of a reason for that. But it will be interesting to see how that plays out. And it's especially interesting just because it happens so immediately after. I suspect that it is a cop, and it's going to be revealed, but kind of shown off as like, okay, there's a witness to it. Somebody who saw the Punisher logo, and Frank Castle is going to get blamed, and that's going to lead to him taking on this group of corrupt cops who use his symbol. And if you want to kind of dive into some really interesting conversation about this, and I mean, it's not, I guess, less conversation, more just a really interesting explanation of it. If you go watch the Real Rejects reaction video of episode 2 after this, I think that Koyjandro, in kind of their review piece of it, does a really good job of breaking down what Frank Castle stands for and why, like, Frank Castle Punisher would be so incredibly opposed and to police officers using his symbol, and also why it doesn't really, like, there's this disconnect, because, like, the Punisher, just to kind of put my words on it, the Punisher symbol, the Punisher, he is about his view of justice with extreme prejudice. He is going to kill. And for police officers to have that, he would have an issue with that, because that's not what police officers are for. They are not judge, jury, and executioner. They are there to protect and serve. And he would dislike their use of that a lot. So I think next episode could be the one where we get Frank Castle showing up, maybe one further down the line. I'm trying to think of the release schedule. So 1, 2, 3. It might be 2 weeks from now. It might be episodes 5 and 6, where we kind of get that Frank Castle double episode arc. And episode 5 or 4, coming up here next week, might be more about Fisk and Fisk's take on vigilantes, and the death of White Tiger. And it is worth just mentioning to rest in peace to the actor who played the White Tiger. I believe it was he had cancer and passed away. So it was, just a well done episode. But I should have said this before the spoiler section. But if you're here through spoilers, drop your non-spoiler thoughts on this episode down in the comment section below. I'd be really curious to know what people think of this episode, if you feel the way I do about it or not. And if you're enjoying the content here on 10 Minute Marvel, please give the video a thumbs up and check out our conversation on the first 2 episodes on the 10 Minute Marvel podcast. We'll be talking about this episode on next week's podcast. You can find the podcast here on YouTube. Click onto the channel, subscribe if you haven't already, and we appreciate everybody who has subscribed and is checking out the videos. And then click that notification bell, know when new videos come out. But then you can click on the podcast tab, or you can search for 10 Minute Marvel wherever your friendly neighborhood podcasts from. But with that, we'll see you next time.